Good morning and good afternoon for those who have joined us today, and welcome back to our week 2 of the Sophos XG Firewall Academy. My name is Jade Evans and I'm the Event Marketing Manager here at Sophos and will be the host today kicking the webinar off. For those who are here with us now, we'll be starting in a few moments. Again, we have numbers really driving high, so I want to make sure we have full attendance before kicking off the webinar. Please sit back, grab a drink, and again, we'll be starting in 2 minutes. Hello and welcome to those who've just recently joined us, and welcome back to today's 5th session out of our 9 technical educational webinars for the Sophos XG Firewall Academy. Before we start, I would like to run over a couple of housekeeping points for those who may not have joined our sessions before. All attendees will be on mute for the duration of the presentation. However, please feel to post questions via our Q&A panel or chat box, which we can locate on the right-hand side of your screens in our GoToWebinar area. Join us for today's session. We have our dedicated Sophos experts who will be answering your questions throughout the presentation. And on today's presentation, we'll be focusing on getting the most from XG Firewall, routing and managing traffic. After today's video, we'll be addressing the most relevant questions live with Jayesh. And finally, for this session, this is going to be recorded and will be made available to all registrants within 24 hours. I provided the event page where the on-demand recording will be made available, which is events.sophos.com/EMEA XG Academy. For those who are still waiting for yesterday's recording, this will be up in a due course. So without further ado, wishing you all a nice and informative session, and make sure you ask lots of questions to our dedicated team. Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the XG Academy for 2021. My name is Grant Lamb from the Sophos Sales Engineering team, and in this video we'll be talking about managing traffic through the XG Firewall. Whether you've got experience from other firewall vendors or even from our own UTM-9 platform, there are quite a few things that the XG does differently, so this video should act as a useful guide to help you navigate some of these differences and get yourselves started correctly. What we'll go through is we'll start off with just some of the basic network and routing configuration, just so you guys can get your connectivity set up. Then we'll jump into the rules and policies and how we actually manage that. Once we've got a good grasp on all of those topics, we'll move into a quick example scenario of a kind of typical use case and see how you can apply the rules to get traffic manipulated the way you want. And then also showcase some of the built-in tools that we have with the XG to help you guys troubleshoot and verify traffic. So let's start off with the network configuration. So if I jump over to my XG Firewall, we get to the dashboard. When you do the initial setup, you do jump through a quick setup wizard. So that'll get you some of your basics set up with a LAN interface and a WAN interface. But if you want to do anything on top of that, which you probably do, that's going to be over under configure and in the network section. So it'll jump you over to a list of your interfaces. This is where you'll see those initial WAN connection and LAN connection that you set up. But if you want to add any additional interfaces, you'll see those as kind of unbound, disabled. So you can just click on any of these physical ports and configure them from here. So if you're coming from a UTM-9, you will notice that the XG is now zone-based. So this gives you another way to help organize and classify the traffic in your environment. So I could say drop this into the LAN zone and then add an IP address, or put this into the WAN zone and give it a gateway for a remote uplink. So that's how you would add interfaces. On top of physical interfaces, you can add much more. So under the add interface button here, this is where you would add Ethernet bridges, IP address aliases, VLANs, port aggregation, or if you're using our remote Ethernet devices, this is also the same section that you would set that all up. One thing I'll point out is if you want to expand from just the default zones that we provide, under the zone section, you can quickly add another zone and assign interfaces to that. There is also a Wan Link Manager. So if you have multiple uplinks, I've only got one, but if you have multiple, then this is where you would decide, how you want to handle the different uplinks. Do you want one to be, active and another one backup, or do you want them both active and you can load balance across them? So when you select one of these gateways, this is where you can decide whether it's an active or backup connection, the weighting of that particular uplink, and then the failover rules is the decision when it's going to fail over to one of the backup connections. So in my case, if I'm unable to ping a particular IP address over that port, then we'll shift over to a backup connection. Aside from that, there's just a couple quick things for kind of typical networking connectivity. So DNS, this is going to be the DNS servers for your XG firewall, so you can add in your domain controller or whatever DNS server you have. And then for DHCP, that's under the DHCP section. This is where you'll set up your servers or relays for particular ports. This is also where you can see a really handy list of all the leases that you've been given out, or that you've given out. So if you're wondering what a particular device, what address that received, you can see that under the DHCP section. So that's network connectivity. Let's take a quick look at some of the routing. This one will be quick as well. It's a really short section. So under networking, there's another routing section. So you do have static routes, of course. There's also dynamic routing, so you can tie this in with BGP, OSPF, or RIP if you're using that in your environment. The one main thing I'll highlight in this section is going to be the SD-WAN policy routing. So this is where you can take particular traffic that you classify and route that over a specific gateway. Again, if you have multiple uplinks. So the way this would work is you'd add a new rule here, you'd give it a name, and you just decide on which traffic you want to select. So that can be based off of the incoming interface, or by source, destination, network, particular service. You can even do specific applications or even users or groups, and then route that over a selected primary gateway and even a backup gateway. So that's how you would set up your SD-WAN policy routes. While we're on the topic of setting up your routes, when it comes to enabling that for particular zones, that's actually done through something called device access. So say I did set up BGP, OSPF, or any other dynamic routing protocol. I'll have to go and make sure that under administration, and device access, that I have the dynamic routing service enabled for that particular zone. So if I want this running in my LAN, then I can enable it there, or for any other additional zones I set up. And just, I guess, while we're in this topic, any other service on the XG that you need to make sure is running on a particular zone, that's all listed here. So whether it's the web admin interface, SSH access, authentication services, that's all assigned per zone and done through device access. So let's move on and actually jump into the rules and policies on the XG firewall. So rules and policies are going to be the biggest difference you'll notice when it comes to the XG firewall. And the reason for that is we treat our firewall rules as kind of the central point for applying traffic inspection and security. In other words, if I show you the rules and policies section here, while there are separate sections for web filter policies, application control policies, and those are all configured within their respective sections, those are only applied at the firewall rule. So while I can set up a particular web content control to say block particular websites, that won't take any effect until I've added that to one of my firewall rules here. So first thing when you're in the rules and policies section is that everything is top down first match. So I can really easily click and drag these rules around to reorder them as I see fit. And I can group them together as well. I've got a lot of rules to work with. When I'm reviewing my rules, I can really quickly see at a glance how much traffic is being handled by a particular rule, which source, destination, or service is involved, and what protection and features I have enabled for that rule. So when I hover over this section on the right, I can see that I have web filtering, application control, IPS, and some other policies enabled for this traffic. So that's how we classify things. Is first we see what traffic we want to handle, and then how we want to handle that traffic. So let's walk through a example firewall rule and see what that process kind of looks like. So first thing right at the top, you give it a name, select the position, and if you want to add it to a group, and what type of action you want to take, if you want to accept, drop, reject that traffic, and if you want to log that. Then in the next section is where you define your interesting traffic. So this would be purely based off zone if you'd like, or it could be tied down to a specific network or IP address, even during a scheduled time. Same thing with destination zones, so particular zone, network, IP address, or service. What we can do additionally is match user identity. So I could say if I have traffic coming from a particular zone and matches a particular user or group, then this firewall rule applies. So I have that ability as well and can be very granular with my firewall policies. There is also a section here for creating exclusions if you have particular networks or IP addresses that you don't want to have match this particular firewall rule. Then once you have all that set up, then you just decide how you want to handle all of that traffic. So first thing you can do is create a linked Nat rule. What this will do is take any of the traffic that you just defined, whenever that's matched, it will NAT it in the same way. So you don't have to have two separate, a separate firewall rule and a separate NAT rule and make sure that both are defined in the same traffic. This has one place to define the traffic and you can apply NAT translation to that. And on top of that, you can throw in all the other security features. So web filtering, I can select a particular policy here. This is where I would apply that. Application control, these are all my application control policies, which would be under the application section, but I apply them here at the firewall rule. Same with QoS or IPS. I can decide whether or not I want to decrypt SSL traffic, utilize Sandstorm against zero-day threats, scan FTP for malware. All those security features would be applied here. This is also the same section where you would enable our security heartbeat. So this would be monitoring the health status of your endpoints if they have the Sophos Central InterceptX agent installed. And it gives you a more automated way to say if a particular endpoint, say, doesn't have a heartbeat or goes into a bad health status, then you can automatically lock them out from particular firewall rules purely based off of the health status. So that's synchronized heartbeat down here. Now, when I am in one of these rules, say I do jump in here and I need to add a new firewall policy, or I need to change one of my firewall policies or web policies, sorry, then I don't have to go and jump into the web protection section and modify the policy, lose all my progress, then jump back in and redo the firewall rule. We have a lot of nested configuration built in, so I can jump in here and take my default workplace policy, click the edit button, and that'll open up a nested web policy configuration in the same section. So again, I don't have to jump through different areas of the UI to get to where I need to go. So in here, it's a full editor. I can move these up and down. I can add new categories, allow, block, create exceptions as needed. I can even go in here if there's particular activities that I've defined. I can add a new activity, modify some of the existing activities as they are, and do that all from within the firewall rule. Save all my changes, jump back through, save all these changes, and I've now modified my web filter policy from within my firewall rule. So that nested configuration, the single point to define interesting traffic, just makes the whole process for applying security a little more streamlined when it comes to the XG. So that's how you'd set up a firewall rule. I'll cancel out of here. But let's take a closer look at Nat Rules. So while you can do the linked Nat Rules like I mentioned, and those will be easily identifiable with this little chain link icon, and it'll show you which firewall rule it's linked to, you still do have the ability to set up separate Nat Rules if you prefer that kind of flexibility, or if it better suits your environment. So you could say have a separate generic Nat rule to match all your outbound traffic, and then specific linked Nat rules for particular firewall rules. You can definitely do that. That's all under the Nat Rules section. So you really easily see kind of the original traffic that you're defined, how it's going to be translated, and if it's particular to any interface. Another thing I like to see in here is that you can track the usage of a particular Nat rule. So whether or not that's working, that's another way you can see the actual usage of that rule. This is a little bit outside of the scope of this video, but there are also your SSL and TLS inspection rules within the rule and policies section. This is where you would define what traffic you want to decrypt and how you want to decrypt that SSL traffic. So with all that in mind, that's how you set up rules. That's how we handle applying filtering to any of the traffic through the firewall. Let's quickly jump through a kind of example scenario and see how we can configure that with the XG Firewall. In this scenario, let's say I have a regular network that I want to provide internet access to using the default WAN IP, but there's a specific host that I want to treat differently. I want this one to appear from a different external address, and also give it a different web filter policy so that it doesn't have access to sophos.com. So how can I set this up with the XG Firewall? Three main steps. One, just set up the additional address as an alias for the WAN interface. Then create two separate firewall rules so that we're handling the regular network and the specific host differently. And then make sure that there's separate NAT rules for each of them, one giving the specific host that extra address we set up. So in the XG, I can jump over to the network section. This is where I can quickly add that additional address. So I'll add an alias here, put that onto port 2, which is my WAN interface. Save that. And that'll be populated under the list of addresses for that port. So you can see that right here. 192.168.1.200 is referenced as port 2:0. Now I can go over to my rules and policies, and I can add a new firewall rule. So let's set this up for the main network. So my main network policy, I'll put that at the top of my list for now because I just have some other rules at the moment. I won't throw that into any particular group, but I will log that traffic. Then I'll specify my LAN zone, anything coming from my LAN network. If I'm ever curious what one of these definitions is, I can easily hover over them and see what network this is defined. Then I'll specify the WAN as the destination to any host. Won't be doing anything like user identity, but I can create a linked Nat rule here and just give this a generic mask. So the default mask policy will just use the address of the outbound interface. So in this case, the default IP of my WAN interface. I can save that Nat rule. And for web filtering, I'll apply default workplace policy. I can, of course, go in here and add any other additional policies I want, any other traffic filtering, but I'll just go ahead and save this rule as it is. And then the next step, set up that additional rule for the specific host. So you can see my main network policy is now at the top. I can add a new rule here. I'll put this and make sure it's above the more generic rule that I set up. I won't add this to group either, but this will be my specific host policy. Throw that into the LAN. And in here, I can create a definition on the fly if I don't have one already. So I can hit create new, create IP address, and punch in the that specific host IP. There we go. And for the destination, I'll put the WAN as well. I'll create a linked Nat rule here. So under here, I'll need to make sure I specify that that additional address. So here I can make one for port 2:0. This address is going to be 1.200. Can save that, and there's my NAT policy. For web filtering, I'll go in here and I can create a new web filter policy right on the fly. Again, this can block Sophos.com. And under here, what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a custom user activity. What this is doing is just has a list of URLs, which includes Sophos.com. So I can select custom user activity, make sure that the action is set to block, enable this, and then go ahead and save this new policy. Or the name already exists. So let's just block site Sophos.com, give it a new name. So that's saved. I've got my filtering, got my NAT. I can save this firewall rule. And in a moment, there we go. We've got our two new rules, one at the top for the specific IP and one for the main network. So now let's test it out. So first thing I'll do is bring over my two hosts here just to demonstrate and generate some traffic. We can see that I have one particular host in the main network, so .111. Then I also have that specific host that I set up, the .21. So if I open up a browser for this specific host, sophostest.com should be blocked, which it is under custom category. And then back on the main machine, navigating to sophostest.com does work. So we can test it out that way. That's the best case if you actually have access to these devices. But let's say you don't. Say you're doing this remotely and you don't actually have a way to test this with the live workstations. So instead, what I can do is go onto my XG Firewall. Once I've set up my policies, I can open up the log viewer. That'll open up this separate window here. And I can do a policy test to actually test what is going to happen with particular traffic. So if I'm going to sophostest.com, I can even test with a user identity. But I'll say for my firewall rules and web filter policies, what happens if I'm coming from 40.21. And this will show you which firewall rule it's hitting, what the action is, and why. So I can see we're hitting firewall rule number 13. The result is to block that based off of the custom category and this particular rule in the web filter policy. If I flip that over to .111, you'll see that we get a different firewall rule with a different action. So this is one quick way to verify that you're hitting the right rule that you expect and the action is being taken properly. Another way you can do this based off of live traffic is just under the actual log viewer here. So I'll have the first page you get to is the firewall, but you can view a bunch of different other logs based off which facility you're looking for. However, for this traffic, I can filter based off, say, source IP, look for that specific address, and I'll be able to see right here where the traffic is and what particular rule it's hitting, and even the Nat rule, so I can know whether or not I'm hitting the correct Nat rule. For any of these, if I click on this firewall rule ID and I filter by the firewall rule, that will take us over to our rules and policies in the main XG UI, and I can see exactly what firewall rule that is. Similarly with the Nat rule, I can filter by that Nat rule, and that'll jump me over to my Nat rules, and I'll see exactly which one is being applied, which in my case is the correct one for port 2:0. If you want to get a little more advanced, there are some other options here as well. I can perform a packet capture to actually view live traffic as it runs through the firewall. So I can click Open PCAP. This will open another section here with our packet capture tool. So this will be done through the log viewer, or I can access this through the UI under the Diagnostics section. So Diagnostics Packet Capture. If you're familiar with TCP dump, we use the exact same syntax here for the filters. So I can say host 172.16.40.21. Can hit save, enable this, and if I generate some traffic here, say reload the page, that will show up here. I'll be able to see what the inbound and outbound ports are and which Nat rule and firewall rule we're hitting. So this is another way you can view and verify that traffic on your own. Another way, if you'd like, is you could do it with the reverse way. If I search for the destination instead, this will allow us to see the source address that we get translated to. So if again I go back here and reload that page, let's see if we pick up any traffic here. So you can see let me filter this a little even further here. Actually, let's just do a display filter for port 4. Let's do port 4. I have some other traffic going on, but here we go. So you'll see, for example, our source address going outbound to sophostest.com. That is then translated to the correct address, which goes outwards, and then we'll see any responding traffic coming back on that address as well. So another way to verify that traffic is taking the correct path through the firewall. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope that was useful in terms of seeing some of the differences with the XG, how we handle things, and how you can go about accomplishing different rules and policies within the XG firewall. If there's any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us at globaltraining@sophos.com. Thanks.
Great, thank you everybody. So now we have Jayesh, who's going to come on camera and off mute and start answering some of the questions that you guys have been kindly answering throughout that presentation. So we can see your screen perfectly. Jayesh, just waiting for the camera. Perfect, we can see you. So we've had some really great questions coming through. So some of the items that have been asked is, can I route traffic across a VPN?
Yes, VPN traffic can be routed without any issues. So if we navigate to, like, for example, if we take an IPsec VPN site to site, for example, so all we need to do is just create, while creating a VPN connection, we need to make sure that the interesting traffic is selected in the local subnet so that the traffic would be routed through this particular VPN connection.
Thank you. And where do I configure a WAF rules?
Oh, that means WAF. Yeah, it's a good question. So after introducing version 18, the WAF, that is Web Application Firewall rules, have been moved to a different section that is under the action. So when you create a new rule, there is an option called Protect with Web Server Protection. So when you click on it, it will then transform this rule into the WAF rule, wherein you can select your pre-configured templates such as Exchange Auto Discover. By the way, I saw a question related to this Exchange Auto Discover. So here is how you can configure the WAF rule for the Exchange server and have your servers protected through the WAF.
Right. Next up, are users only authenticated if the firewall rules is set to match users?
Yep. So if you want the users to authenticate on the XG firewall, then that tick mark of matching known users is required, because if that tick mark is not enabled, then even though if any unauthenticated traffic comes on XZ firewall, it would be allowed as it is. So authentication won't be checked. So make sure that if you want authentication on your XZ firewall, you get this option tick mark.
Next up, how do I view bandwidth usage?
Bandwidth usage. Okay, so when we navigate to current activities and live connections, we can see various live connections classified as applications or username or even source IP address. And here you can see the live bandwidth, the upload as well as the download transfer of associated IP addresses. And you can even filter the refresh rate. So this is how you can see the bandwidth usage.
And then just off the back of that, that's just come in. Can I do any reports of the live of the bandwidth?
Reports, yes. And so if you want to see the bandwidth associated to those IP addresses or users in the report section, we can actually navigate to reports, application and web. And here you can see an option of user data transfer report, where it will show the option. Actually, this is, let me just filter this to some old dates. So it will show some data. Yep. So here you can see which is the user, what is the uploaded and downloaded data transfer usage. So you can get this data from report as well.
Perfect, thank you. What else we have? Can I export logs from the log viewer?
Log viewer, yes. So when we open log viewer, it shows an option, an icon to export the logs. So when we click on it, it will download a CSV file, and this file will contain the exact same logs that you see on the log viewer.
Next, we've been asked, a Wan Link Manager can load balance more than 2 internet lines, 3 DSL lines, for example?
Yep, that can be done through Wan Link Manager. So for example, if you have more than 2 WAN links or internet links, they would be by default load balanced, provided they are configured with type active. So for example, if I click this one, this is active WAN link manager. So if I have two WAN links and if they are configured with type active, both will be taking part in WAN link load balancing decisions. And of course, the ISP bandwidth limits would be different for each link. So you can manage that with the help of weights. So if you configure more weight to a particular a gateway, it will process more traffic.
I'm coming from a UTM, so the zone option is not completely clear. Is there an extra documentation over the zone options and when you use zones or other groups?
Yeah, so in UTM device, we didn't have the concept of zones. It is there in XG. So zones can be basically used to configure your firewall rules and make it more easy for you to differentiate your traffic based on the zones rather than the network IP addresses. And in terms of documentation, yes, we'll share across some documentation on the FAQ.
Great. How do I protect networks from malware and rootkit using the Sophos XG Firewall?
How do I protect malware and?
Rootkit using Sophos XG Firewall.
Okay, so for that, we have this option of threat protection. So if we configure a firewall rule, you can see the option of, let me show that option over here. In web filtering, you can see zero-day threats with Sandstorm. So if there is any malware as an attachment and if user is trying to download it, it will be detected by the Sandstorm and will submit it to the Sandstorm analysis before it gets executed on your network.
How
And
can
of
I
course, we
see?
have,
Oh, sorry.
sorry. And, in addition to that, we also have advanced threat option, which will be useful to detect some malwares that are trying to do some malicious activity in your network. So we do have some like those security features that will protect the malwares. I mean, protect the network from malware.
Right, sorry for cutting over you there. How can live bandwidth for firewall not just for users, or how can I see live bandwidth for firewall not just for users? Sorry.
For live bandwidth for firewall, for that we can actually navigate to diagnostics and system graphs, wherein it will show how much bandwidth is being utilized on each interface. Actually, this is like I only have a read-only exit, but this is the exact section where you will go and you can see the bandwidth usage on per interface basis.
And then another question back to the reporting. Can user reports be automated to send emails?
Yep, you can configure email address as an option to receive notifications as well as the reports on timely basis.
How can I route any VPN traffic through SD-WAN policy?
So once a VPN is configured, we will go to routing and we will configure a custom gateway for that particular VPN connection. And once that is done, we will configure a SD-WAN routing policy through which we can route that particular traffic based on source, destination, and under the gateway, you can select that particular gateway, the custom gateway which is created on your VPN tunnel.
Please can you show us how to specify a particular WAN link on a rule?
Specify a WAN link on a rule.
Yes.
Actually, the WAN link is not associated with firewall rule directly anymore on the web UI. So if you want to make routing decisions, like any specific routing decisions, for example, routing traffic from ISP1, and then there's another kind of traffic that needs to be routed through ISP2. So those kind of configuration can be done with the help of SD-WAN routing policy.
How do I select a specific ISP for some clients if I have two ISP?
Yes, this is exactly related to what we just discussed in the previous question. So you can have granular controls of source, destination, and here is the routing decision that you want to take, whether you want to uh, route it via specific link or you want to load balance between the available links.
Perfect. How do I give a higher preference to one ISP over other if my client has more than two ISPs?
Yeah, so that can be done based on the weights. So if we go to Wan Link Manager, it should show the option of weight. This one. So the higher value of weight you configure, the high priority it gets and more traffic it would be processing when it takes part in the routing decision. So higher value of bandwidth you have, you can set the higher value in the weight as well.
Can I get a backup of firewall via email every week?
Yep. So for that, let me just show you the exact navigation path. So if you go to backup and firmware, backup, restore, here are three options that you can see. One is local, one is via FTP, and the third one is email. So it's possible via three modes.
Is it possible to send us a step-by-step setup site to site for VPN connection?
Yep. So how-to videos as well as the articles are available on our community website. So we'll share it across with you over the FAQ document. No problem. It is definitely available.
Is it possible to disable backup encryption? And if yes, how do we do that?
So I guess this question is being referred to this option, backup encryption of password. So this was made mandatory from a particular firmware of version 17 and 18. I don't remember the exact ML version, but this is to ensure that that there are no backup being misused. So this is actually a mandatory thing. We cannot disable this.
We just had a few people to say if you can kindly repeat about the uses of weight in the gateway again.
Okay, so let me go back to Wan Link Manager. Yep, here it is. So assuming that we have 2, 3, or 4 WAN links, and each are having different bandwidth available from their ISPs. So for example, this DHCP port B gateway is having 20 Mbps of speed. So what I can do is instead of assigning the weight as 1, I'll increase the weight as 2, which means this WAN link will have a high priority in processing the traffic as compared to the other WAN link or the other gateways that are available. So in short, you just need to make sure to assign more weight value to the WAN link that needs to process more traffic.
Great. How can we use a specific WAN uplink for a certain traffic? For example, Windows Update limited to a single WAN uplink.
Yep, that again brings us back to the SD-WAN policy. So when you want a specific ISP to take care of certain kind of traffic, you can go back to SD-WAN policy routing and select applications. So this is also a cool feature that we have. We can select particular applications and route it through a specific gateway or specific ISP.
Perfect, thank you. How can I generate a report based on user browsing sites visited during a specific time of period within the network?
So for that, let me see if I can show the example over here. So we go to reports, application, And this is already getting filtered from 27th of January to today's date. So this again brings us back to the user data transfer, wherein I can see that, okay, Paul is the user who has done this much amount of data transfer. And if we want to see in-depth details like what are the websites and applications, so in that case, the dashboard itself is giving us that option. So these are the top categories and websites that are accessed. And these are the domains. So if I click on this one particular domain, it will show further details like which is the user that has tried maximum hits, which group does he belongs to, what are the categories, what is the IP address that is associated with that host. So basically you can get those kind of details from this report section. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So I'll just do a couple of more. How do I generate scheduled reports?
Okay, so for scheduled report, let me go to custom, and here I think it was in the custom. I don't. Actually, I don't remember that option, but it's definitely there. Yeah.
Not a problem. So how do I disable WAN SSH connection temps?
For that, you need to first make sure that we go to administration, device access. Probably this might not give me the permissions because it's a read-only access. Let me see if I can use my other XG firewall. Yep. So this one, make sure that on the WAN side, you keep the SSH option disabled and allow only particular IP addresses that are trusted for the SSH. And of course, use the public key authentication like the RSA key for SSH. So this is how you can make WAN access more secure for SSH in particular.
Great. So just the final two I do. What's the difference in web policy if select none or all?
I think this is being referred to in the firewall rule. So let me just navigate that real quick. Click a new firewall rule. Web policy. Yep, web filtering. Web policy none. None versus allow all. That's the question, right? I guess.
That's
Yep.
it, yes.
So
Thank you.
when we yep. So when we select none, that means the traffic is not subjected for the web filtering. It will allow everything that is passing through it, and it won't be checked for the category, web category checking or any sort of web filtering policies. But the moment we select allow all, that means it will be processed by the web filtering module. And of course, the advantage is you will also see the reports. So if anybody is trying to access any website, it would be allowed. No action would be taken, like it won't be dropped or rejected, but you can see the reports and it will be logged. So that's the key difference.
Perfect. And I'll just close off on this question. When we use Sophos Connect VPN, communication between Sophos Connect user is available, or will we need to add FW rules for them?
Can you repeat the last part? Once
Yeah,
when the Sophos Connect is connected?
between Sophos Connect users is available, or do we need to add an FW rule for them?
Yep, firewall rule is actually required because the traffic is coming from VPN. It's the VPN connection. So you need to make sure that VPN to LAN or DMZ or wherever your resource is sitting, you need to make sure that those particular firewall rules are configured on XG Firewall so that traffic would be allowed and pass through the XG Firewall and will reach the actual destination, which might be in your LAN or it might be in your DMZ. So in short, yeah, rules are required.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for answering all them live Q&A for us, Jayesh. For those who are still with us on the webinar, Jayesh will be going back onto the Q&A box, as well as all our software experts who are there are still answering your questions. So please keep posting them and we'll get back to as many as we can in the time. Just for those who may not be aware, I just wanted to make you aware about our Sophos rewards that we're offering within this webinar series. So for joining us for 4 or more live sessions, you can earn a free Sophos XG Firewall course, which is a training e-learning course. This is available for both our end users and our partners. So it's a great opportunity to get even more qualified after this webinar academy. We are back tomorrow, same time, 10 to 11 a.m. GMT, and that we're looking at the innovation session, which is getting the most from XG Firewall, controlling and managing your environment. And again, just a reminder for those who may have just missed the introduction of our session, you will have access to all the webinar recordings, all the previous sessions, as well as today's recording. These will be posted within 24 hours after the webinar is posted. There's just an example where the videos are located on the web page. If you just scroll down and click on the Watch on Demand session, and you'll be able to gain access to them. So a big thank you for those who have joined us for today. As I mentioned, we still have our live SE availability on our chat, so please stay and continue asking questions and we'll get back to as many of them as possible. For those that were unable to answer today, we are producing a FAQ document throughout the XG Firewall Academy, which we'll make available to you at the end of the series. Thank you ever so much for joining us live today, and we look forward to welcoming you back tomorrow. Thank you, take care. Hi there for those who are still left with us, to say that with today's XG Firewall Academy session is now coming to an end and we'll be closing today's session. Thank you for those who answered all your questions, and apologies if we were unable to get back to you today. But as mentioned, we will be producing an FAQ document which will be provided at the end of the Academy series for you to try and get back to the remaining questions. Thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you back for the final session of this week's tomorrow at 10 to 11 a.m. Take care.